Hi, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Today, we have another two-part episode. So we have Dr. Franz from UNL talking, and then we also have some people from Water Administration talking all about snow. So stay tuned.
Woo! I love snow. Hi everyone, welcome back for another episode of Around the Water Cooler with NeDNR. Today it's me, Devin, and
Alexa, hi.
Hi, and today we have a couple special guests. We have Jeremy and Jim. Hello, guys.
Hello.
Hello.
Do you guys want to introduce yourselves real quick and just give a little spiel about what you do at the department and your expertise?
Sure. I'm Jeremy Gailey. I'm our Water Administration Division Manager. Been with the department for about 22 years and about 2 months longer than Jim.
Haha.
Bragging rights.
Yeah, Jim Williams, and I'm an engineer in charge of stream gauging in NeRAIN and work with a survey crew as well. And I report to Jeremy along with another almost 30 people, I think, in the field offices.
Perfect. Thank you guys for being with us today. So today we're going to talk about something super fun and timely because tonight it's supposed to snow. Yes. Today we're going to talk about snow. So to kick off, we're just going to give a little bit of background about snow and snowfall in Nebraska. So what is winter like in Nebraska? Well, temperatures across the state vary between highs of 39 degrees Fahrenheit, about 3.9 degrees Celsius, and lows of 16 degrees Fahrenheit. So that's negative 8.9 degrees Celsius.
You know, on Family Guy, they like go to the weather, and it's like, what's the weather like? And like, it's gonna be cold. That's what winters are like.
It's
in
cold
Nebraska.
outside.
It's gonna be cold. Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Snow in Nebraska can start as early in November, it goes until April, but most of the time I feel like it snows in January, almost. Like January, February, I think is our peak time.
This is the time.
Yeah, this is the time for the snowfall. I mean, what was it? Last week we had a couple feet ranging across the state. It was awful to shovel my car. Yeah, the National Weather Service says a typical winter, the average snowfall is 20 to 40 inches, with most of it being in the panhandle. So,
Yes.
although we do get those like random blizzard events out east.
I know, fun fact. Nebraska can see blizzard conditions, so anyone listening out of state, yeah, we get a lot of really cold, bad days sometimes.
And we also found that the highest amount of snowfall in Nebraska was 1 foot and 9 inches in Sheridan County in 24 hours. And it was in 1927. That was also from the National Weather Service.
Oh my
That's
gosh.
crazy. I would just leave.
And another. Alexa's got a career fair to go to out of state that day.
Yeah.
Another fun fact is, so UNL has a record of all of our, like, average snowfall, I think by month, dating back to, like, the 1880s to present, which is insane. Who was doing that? And,
That's a lot of data.
they're
It's
like-
probably citizen science people. The irony, we're going to talk about that.
Yes.
You might be thinking, like, who cares about snow? It sucks. You, like, freeze, you know, you have to scrape your car, whatever. But snow's actually super important in the Midwest, but especially Nebraska because it recharges the aquifer and the streams and rivers that we have. So that's why we're going to talk about snow today and talk about where that the snowfall data, how we track it, how we kind of use that in our water supply, water administration stuff, but then also like the citizen science aspect of snow and precipitation. Like snow is very important, and that's why we're making this podcast, because we care.
That's right. And we're going to showcase some of those citizen scientists when we talk to Jim a little bit.
You were saying that you help with NeRAIN. Can you talk about what that is if somebody has no idea what NeRAIN is?
Sure. NeRAIN is a citizen science project, so we have volunteers across the state that read a rain gauge or take in other facts about the weather. And during the summertime, we have a lot of interest and a lot of activity, typically 500-600 people are uploading data after a rainfall event in the summer. It drops off quite a bit in the winter, and we emphasize with folks that they, of course, should not do anything that's unsafe, and if they move south for the winter, for example, yeah, no problem, no issue. But if you're going to be around, we have a strong interest in seeing that snow or other information reported every single day. And I emphasize over and over again that recording the zeros statistically is every bit as important as recording an actual snow event.
So how do you track the precipitation?
NeRAIN provides the same rain gauge to everybody. We now do allow folks to use other types of rain gauges, but we're part of an international network, and it's reported through COCORAS, which is based in Fort Collins, Colorado, and associated with Colorado State University over there. And we only report the standard information to them. So it's a very simple plastic rain gauge. It's 4 inches in diameter. It's about 1.5 feet tall. During the winter time, we urge people to take the funnel off of it and the inner tube out of it. So the gauge has a large outer tube with no markings on it, and it has a small inner tube. And it reads 1 inch of rain as being about a foot column of water. So that makes it real easy after a rain event to see accurately measure down to 1/100th of an inch. During the winter, though, it is a completely different animal. If it goes through a freeze-thaw cycle, that inner column can often crack. So we ask people to take it out and just measure using their large 4-inch tube. A couple ways that it can be measured. There are 4 numbers that we like to get out of it. And the first would be water equivalent in that snowfall. And as you said, very often it's a mixed event. It start as snow and move to sleet, or start as rain, move through sleet into snow. And so you can take that inner tube, which you have stored carefully in your house, fill it with water, write down how much warm water out of the tap, just lukewarm water, write down how much it is, because it's often not exactly an inch, even if you put it all the way to the top. So it's going to be 0.95 inches, 0.98, whatever the number is, and you pour it inside of your large 4-inch tube that you've brought into the house, and you slosh it around. If you still have ice stuck in the bottom or ice on the top, then you want to grab another tube of lukewarm water, tap water, pour it into your large 4-inch tube, slosh it around until you have melted everything that was inside that tube. Then you grab your funnel, put it on top of that inner tube, the graduated cylinder that has everything measured out to 100ths of a foot, and you pour all the water out of the 4-inch tube back into the smaller one. You got to be careful, because you're going to have more pores coming out of the big tube than you put in, and you don't want to overrun that small tube and have water running everywhere, and then you've lost your measurement. So if you put in 0.95 and 0.95, and you take out exactly 2 inches, then the difference is going to be 0.10 inches, and that was the water equivalent. And it's just shocking and sad how often you can have 3, 4, 5 inches of snow inside that large tube, and it measures out to such a small
Itty-bitty.
itty-bitty amount. There are 3 other measurements. You involve some of the same tools for some of it. So number 1 would be inches of both new snow as well as snowpack. And for this, you take a ruler out to your yard to find a typical area where you have shoveled since the last snow, cleared it off, and so you stick a shovel or a spatula or something into that new snow, move it enough to the side that you can put your ruler there and you can measure, okay, 3 inches fell last night, or yesterday and last night. So that's thickness of new snow as measured on the ground, not in your rain gauge or anything like that. Knowing full well that it stacks up behind a tree and that it's completely bare on one side of the house, you're doing the best you can.
Yeah, so don't go to a drift.
Don't measure
Oh my
the
gosh,
drift.
we had 20 inches of snow.
Yeah, you always worry about people trying to get one up on whoever's measuring down the road. Yeah, I had double what you had again. And then the other number is very similar, and that's where it's been drifting and you haven't shoveled. You go stick a shovel or a spatula or a cookie sheet in the snow, move it aside, but that includes the old snowpack from before, and so that's total snowpack thickness. That number is also interesting in that it can give you a feel for how much is out there, how long it's taking to melt off each time, and that sort of thing. None of these are as critical as snow equivalent in your snowpack. And that's the number the National Weather Service
That
would
sounds
really
intense.
like to see. And to do that, you go to where we just discussed, where you've got both old and new snow stacked up, whatever you think is typical in your yard. You take your big 4-inch tube from your rain gauge, turn it over, and plunge it in. And you're trying to get a core that is 4 inches in diameter. Then you, while you're still holding it down, you stick a spatula or cardboard or cookie sheet underneath it so you can pull it out, take it back in the house, and you melt it down just like we discussed with just the fresh snowfall that was sitting in that same 4-inch tube. And that number is critical because that tells the National Weather Service how much frozen water is sitting on top of the ground that can suddenly go into our rivers and streams if we get a warm rainfall or just a couple of really hot days out there.
Don't you have a network of people or yourself that can help if somebody has questions, like they're not quite sure how to measure, that they can get a hold of somebody and they can walk through the process? They don't have to memorize all of this.
Yes, and you can get information on how to do all of this. We have brochures or web pages really on the NeRAIN website. You can just go to the help menu and find it. Also under the help menu is people to call, and we have a volunteer in most of the NRD offices. They're all listed out there, and if your NRD is not listed, I think that currently there's only one that's not participating, then just call our offices, and our statewide coordinators are at the bottom of that webpage of who to call.
Or if you just want to say hi to Jim.
That's true.
So then if somebody wanted to sign up for it, if they're not involved in any rain, would they go to the website to do that? Or would they go to their NRD office? Or how does that work?
Either way, there's a webpage called How to Get Involved, and it's got some preliminary instructions, some things to read through, and from there you can link to go ahead and register for it. If you are confused by any of that, go to the Who to Contact People That Can Help page and email or call any one of us there. Your local NRD person or the state coordinators.
Yeah, I guess I just want to reiterate that you said, if it doesn't have any precipitation, putting in that zero value is just as important as putting in the other value. And citizen science projects are very important to the state. Like Devin talked about how UNL has snowfall going back to the 1800s. Like a lot of the precipitation data is used in groundwater models, surface water models. It goes into seeing trends of any kind of change. So it'd be really important to get involved.
Go ahead and sign up, and then you should be contacted by your local regional coordinator who's typically within the NRD. And yes, you'll get a free rain gauge and a little bit of training on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, the NRDs are obviously involved, but if you are an after-school program or any kind of thing, this would be a fun citizen science project for children to learn.
It'd be a great one for a classroom.
Yeah,
Middle
that's something you
school
could do
on up
every day.
Would be really good. Yep.
Yeah, and if you're really interested in like storms and whatnot, this is also a really good opportunity to, follow your passion. Yeah.
We'll definitely have you back to talk more about NeRAIN, for sure. It's definitely a worthwhile program to get involved in.
So
Switching gears.
that was so smooth.
I'm just going for it.
We're going. So, Jeremy.
Spotlight's on you.
Yeah, it is. I wish I had a spotlight for realsies. In terms of snow, what has 2023 brought us so far?
Yeah, well, thanks for the flawless segue.
You're welcome. That's what
we're
I'm
known
here for.
No, thus far in 2023, I guess the water year started in October. We were quite a ways behind the overall snowpack in the state of Nebraska as a whole. In eastern Nebraska, it wasn't until we had this recent snowstorm as of just last week actually, where we had 11 inches that we got back to anywhere near normal. Central Nebraska, western Nebraska was doing a little bit better with a couple of snowstorms earlier in the year around Christmas time. So we have a pretty decent snowpack on the ground currently, and that snowpack is important to help feed our rivers and streams in the spring and provide some land cover for the land, so we're not having any additional evaporation from the soil itself.
Well, a lot of people don't realize that snowpack, that affects the water supply of irrigation that goes into the spring and the summer. If we have a mild winter where we don't get a lot of snow, that affects the water supply. And people might not necessarily think those two are connected.
No, you're absolutely right. So the great majority of the water river basins in Nebraska are relying upon direct runoff. The Loop River Basin, for instance, Blue River Basin, or snowpack that we have in the ground in the immediate vicinity, and rain that we get throughout the year. But the Platte River system is entirely different. We're relying upon the snow that's in the mountains in Colorado and Wyoming. So that's one thing when it comes to monitoring water availability, when it comes to water administration, when it comes to water users making plans for their farming and irrigation practices in future years. It's really critical to have that kind of information of how much snowpack, how much water is up in the mountains, to know how much water is going to be stored in those reservoirs that ultimately deliver the water down to the state. So we rely on a product from the USDA NRCS. It's a SnowTel product, and they've got some across the nation. I think they have over 900 of these really thorough instruments. Some of them include, most of them include what would be referred to as a snow pillow that measures the weight of the snow as it's coming down in the mountains. So these are areas that are inaccessible to humans during the wintertime, so they're relying upon all these sensors to work throughout the year. But every week, the NRCS puts out a report on the SnowTel data, which is a soil snow water equivalent, which Jim mentioned before then too. So the most recent one is from February 21st, was just a day ago. So the North Platte Basin is probably the shining star in all the eastern mountain range right now. So we've got over 120% of average snowfall right now. So that's encouraging, since we came out of a drought last year and had a lower snowpack supply of only around 90% of what we had before. So right now, using that data and the average snow flow, stream flow that we see based on those SnowTel readings, we're predicting an adequate supply for all the irrigators that are relying upon water that comes out of the North Platte.
That's good to hear. I'm sure the people are pretty excited about that.
Yeah, especially coming out of a drought.
The winter months are the months of the year where we typically get the least amount of precipitation, although it's important to get as much as we can at this time of year, though, too. But yeah, so having that snowfall available to us in the mountains will go a long ways towards helping us dig out of that drought, hopefully this summer with more average precipitation throughout.
Maybe important to talk about, I mean, it might snow a lot and that's awesome, but we want those kind of like temperatures to slowly go down so that it melts slowly. That way that the ground is able to get that recharge and the streams are able to get it. Like, we don't want a flash flood. So it's important that we have that snowpack, but then also that slow duration of snow melt too.
You know, in late February, we typically see like those temperatures go like kind of high to like super low. Like, does that impact what you guys do, or like what are the implications with that?
For water administration purposes, we're looking at stream flow in the mountains as well as the snow information. But those temperatures are critical too, and you guys alluded to something that we've been seeing, at least anecdotally, over the last 4 or 5 years, where that snow melts fast and it comes out fast. And so long as you don't have 200% of average snowfall and it comes out all at once, when you have those floods, which has occurred before, flood impacts, it's not that terrible. But it's still interesting how warm temperatures earlier in the year gets that water to come out. So we see, whereas 20 years ago we would have seen a gradual melt on that snow, now we see a bigger peak probably in the spring, and we're kind of left hoping that, well, that peak will last another month or two, but really we see that high water come off of the mountains and then it goes down right away. So it factors into how we have to assess the available supply and how to make those management plans too.
Yeah, I feel like I never really cared about snow, and now whenever it snows and I hear my friends complain about it, I'm like, well, we needed it. And they're like, oh my God, stop.
Oh my gosh, we get it. You work for DNR. Yeah. That's kind of what I get. All right. Well, thank you guys for joining us today in this like special episode about snow. It was a lot of fun.
Sure.
But yeah,
I think break time's over.
I was gonna say it.
Oh, okay.
Break time's over.
So,
Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of Around the Water Cooler with NeDNR. Today it's me, Devin, and
Alexa, hi.
And today we have a special guest, Dr. Franz at UNL East Campus. Do you want to introduce yourself and then just talk about what you do here and your expertise?
Yep. So first of all, thanks for inviting me to the podcast. So my name is Trenton Franz. I'm a professor of hydrogeophysics here in the School of Natural Resources, and my research is around different technologies in the water space and looking at things like irrigation efficiency and how we just take technologies and put it into practice around water resources.
So we talked to Jeremy and Jim about the importance of snow in Nebraska, specifically going into water supply for our water administration team. And so we were wondering if you could give us a little bit more context about your research on measuring snowpack. I don't know, the name is kind of daunting.
Yes.
Yeah, so fancy sounding
Yes.
terminology there, but basically these detectors pick up on cosmic rays that are coming from outer space. They make it down to the ground, and then they interact with water or snowpack, and then they bounce back, and our detectors measure neutrons at a certain energy level, and that's related to how much water is in the environment, either soil moisture or snowpack. So cosmic rays, for those not familiar with that, that's like the northern lights, as those are the showers of particles coming down as we're just measuring the end result of that process and using it for hydrological applications.
It still sounds fancy to
Yes,
me.
it does. So you've done research with this, right? Not just in the United States, but in other countries, correct?
Yeah, so we do, we set up networks all across the globe. So I work with the United Nations as an expert consultant. And so we have various projects where they send me out, install these sensors in different environments, teach local scientists from different government agencies how to use the sensor and how to use it in their own research or applications. And so last year I was lucky enough to go down to Bolivia and worked with a group down there to install a sensor near one of their melting glaciers and looking at that soil moisture impact on the city of La Paz, about 2 million people, and they're very reliant on snowpacks, and those are dwindling away over time, and so they're very concerned about what's going to happen with these over time.
So you said that the results from this can go into research or applications. Do they go into like groundwater models, surface water models, or is it just, the local land managers trying to figure out how to best manage this?
Yeah, so lots of different options. So one big one is validating remote sensing. So one of the challenges is especially putting in operational models is you need data everywhere all across the state of Nebraska or a certain watershed. So a lot of times remote sensing is very useful for that, but you also need sensors on the ground to validate that. And so we always have that challenge of how do we take our local measurement and turn it into sort of a useful spatial product that you can put in like a groundwater model or a surface model. So that's kind of the research that we think about is moving beyond our sensor and combining with other technologies to provide input layers for those types of models.
Yeah, I had a question going back to where you place your sensors. Is there a specific process in determining where you're going to put those sensors, or is it like an area that you have some kind of environmental concern, or how does that process go?
Yeah, so great question. So a lot of times our sensors, are, especially with the soil moisture or SWE, is they're point sensors, and so where you place them has a big effect on the actual observation. So the one reason why we like the cosmic ray sensor is it's a passive sensor. It's above the ground, so you don't need to put anything in the ground, and it measures over an area. So it measures over about a 300-foot radius circle is where the neutrons are mixing. So we get a larger scale measurement, which is very nice, especially if you're working with, models on a couple of acres or what have you. So the sensor integrates over that area, and then a depth of about 12 inches for soil moisture. For snowpack or SWE measurements, again, it'll be a similar footprint, and we can do up to about 20 centimeters of SWE. We're using the sensor that's above the snowpack.
2 quick questions. First is, can you define SWE for people that might not know what that is? It's the soil water equivalency, right?
Yep.
Okay.
So basically, if you take a snowpack, go out into your backyard, put it in, a cup of water or a cup, melt it down, is how much liquid you would actually have in that snowpack. And so that's really the number that hydrologists are after, is how much water, how many inches of water are in that snowpack, and then kind of knowing how that snowpack evolves over time. Is it changing density? Is it melting out? Is it accumulating over time? As those are all very useful things for making those forecasts of water supply throughout the year.
Awesome. So you kind of touched on this, but I just want to, I guess, ask the question of like, why is this important? And I think an aspect of why it's important is what you were talking about with scale, right? So it's easier to implement that than just those point sensors or point soil moisture probes, right?
Yep, that's a big one. The other one is environmental concerns for snowpack. A lot of the snow pillows, some of those that are, put in environmentally sensitive areas. Sometimes they contain materials that aren't great, so like antifreeze or some other type of stuff that are hard to change out or get access to. So we've used this technology because again it's a passive sensor, doesn't have any harmful things in the environment. Also very robust, so we put them on the Greenland ice sheet or in the Arctic or Antarctic, and so they're if you have to go visit these sites and it's really expensive to do that, you want something that's very robust and long living. So there's some sort of that cost of revisit time and continuing that data is something that we're looking at for an advantage of this sensor.
Yeah, you wouldn't have to go back to the Arctic if you didn't have to.
I don't know, it might be fun.
That's true. It could be. I don't know. I feel like I'd be too cold. I'd be like,
Yeah, you get cold so easy. I feel like I'm like super warm in here right now, and you're probably like living your best life.
Well, is there any like main takeaways that you want somebody listening to this? What's like the lesson you want somebody to have from this conversation we're having?
Yeah, I just think as scientists, we're getting more clever about how we take observations at different scales. So we can use like cell phone battery life to measure air temperature, or like signal loss between your cell phone towers to measure rainfall rates. And so this is just another technology how we're taking advantage of this opportunistic sensing to do cool hydrological measurements. So things that we're looking for in the future, putting these sensors on like different vehicles. We have some colleagues in Europe that put them on rail trains to collect soil moisture and SWE measurements along rail lines.
Oh, cool.
We can put them on like mail delivery vehicles in rural areas
my
to
gosh.
collect. So there's a lot of cool things in the future to get to novel sensing areas. So we're just excited about how we can use this technology to get some of those challenging scales of observation.
Mailman by day, scientist also
Yeah,
by
I was
day.
just gonna say, if you were to do it on those like transportation routes, the networks, oh my gosh, there's like you could like just get a whole entire area, like the railroads in Europe. Oh my gosh, you could get so much information on that. That's crazy.
Yeah, so yeah, it's a wild world out there. So just sort of interesting, sort of weird effect of the COVID pandemic is there was less flights between the U.S. and Europe. We have a lot of sensors on airplanes, and so our ability to make forecasts during COVID went down because there were fewer transatlantic flights, and we lost that data. So.
What? I didn't know that.
Yeah, so our forecasting skill went down by like 15% or something like that because of that.
These different vehicles that you're talking about, is it just because they have like one route that they follow and you'd want that consistency for your data set, or does it not matter?
Yeah, exactly. So
Okay.
so then you could put those observations, you collect them along the route, and then you could put them into your groundwater model or whatever your model is, and have that data constantly updating. So it'd be kind of like a ground-based satellite, how those are constantly orbiting around. You could do the same thing with ground-based sensors for sensitive regions. If you're worried about what is our soil moisture in this particular region, we're worried about groundwater supplies, thinking about evapotranspiration, how we're going to do some of those water supply forecasts. Is you want that real-time data to inform those models.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. I feel like I just learned so much.
I'm always learning. Anything else you'd like the listeners to know
Or
about?
do you want to give like your contact information if they've got further questions or anything?
Sure. Probably the easiest is just to email me at tfranz2@unl.edu. I'm over in the Hardin Hall, so happy to stop by, take questions, or send me an email if you have any questions. We also have a nice animated video we put together on the technology, so I'll share that with the group as well if you want to include that link and learn more about
Yep.
the Cosmic Ray Probe.
We can definitely do that. They can get more into the science behind it with the visual. That's always nice.
Thanks for joining us for the podcast. It was awesome talking to you. Do you have any final words you'd like to say? That sounds scary, but
Dun dun
it's not.
dun.
So we have a new project where we're collaborating with the USGS, and so they're investing in cosmic ray technology, both the stationary and mobile sensors. And so they have 13,000 different monitoring sites across the U.S. So hopefully someday soon there'll be a cosmic ray sensor coming to different watersheds. I know we're working with them on best standard operating procedures and working through the data and how best to process that. So we'll be doing some field campaigns this summer, and then also be teaching some USGS scientists on how to use the technology.
That's exciting.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Thank you for the invitation, and appreciate you guys reaching out.
awesome. Thank you.
Yeah.